goes from 0 to 1, if we want it to, because it goes from 0 to 1 from the top down, so everything's going to be mirrored. Where do we want to compress our numbers? We want our numbers to become larger, slower. So that would be, we want to just multiply them by themselves. So if we take this guy right here, and we multiply him by himself, and then we use that for our alpha. Let's see what that looks like. Alright, that's the exact opposite of what I want. Yeah, so this is becoming... We want it to actually do the opposite. So what would it be? 1 minus itself multiplied together? So it'd be like this. So we do 1 minus itself, so we basically flip it, we multiply it by itself, so we squish it, and then we invert it again to make it do that. So there we go, there's our shape that we wanted. So if we're in our world here, that's what it's looking like. And of course we can adjust, how much this thing curves, by its base value. We made it real extreme just to make sure we're actually looking at the right thing. Alright, so we can take this thing out. That's looking more like a vortex. Yeah, that's what it's supposed to look like. It's supposed to look all skewed and screwed up. So what we're going to need now is we need the alpha channel for this thing to work properly. So if this is greater than, like we've got the UVs, we also need the alpha for this thing to be multiplied out. So I think basically we need another multiply here for that alpha. So even if this texture was totally proper, So that's going from like 1 to 0. Why would it be going from 1 to 0? So we're taking our v coordinate, which is going from 0 to 1, or 0 to 1. It's 1 up here, it's 1 up here, and it's 0 on the right side. It should be going from 0 to 1 is what I would expect. So the division here is doing something weird, like we divide by the width. Alright, so what we do is we add the base offset, which is going to be 0, plus the waterfall width, which is going to be 1. So we have 1, and then we subtract, we do 1 minus the v. I mean, this is the u, which should start at 0, but it's not. It's not starting at 0, it's starting at 1. So the u, let's see. Well, the u is definitely going from 0 to 1. Alright, so this is a 1 right here. We add it together. We subtract what is 0. We subtract 1 minus this value. 1 minus this value. So this is going to be a 0 to start with. We're subtracting it. So it's going to be a 1, and then we're dividing it by the base. We should be subtracting the far side of this thing minus our stuff, because that'll give us the distance that we are on it. So it's going to go should we be using the u coordinate though? Because u coordinate's going to go from 0 to 1 as we go across. I think maybe we should be using the v. No, that's obviously not correct. You don't see anything wrong? Well, basically what's going on is I want to mask out both sides of this thing, and the left side's not getting masked out. So this value right here basically should show like we've got this value, we divide this by this thing, and we get this value. We should be able to mask out some of these things. So like if it's greater than 1, I guess. If it's greater than 1, it's supposed to be 0. But if it's between these two values, we should have 1. So I guess what I need is another if here. That if it's greater than 0, if A is if it's greater than 0, it is 1 and all that. So just like that, I guess. Can you post a link to a screenshot? You should just PM me that. I don't think one of the mods is on to approve your link. So PM it to me and I'll take a look at it and throw it in there. But yeah, go ahead and send it to me. Yeah, what was going wrong is basically the alpha channel was there. I need to have a mask to cut out the shape of the waterfall because I was just doing a clamp on the U and V coordinates. And the only reason we don't see anything over in this chunk is because the texture bounds actually have transparent stuff, which not all textures would have. Alright, so we have it cut out. So are these parameters that we can mess with? Yes, they are. So why don't we go ahead and add them to our blueprint. So let's create our variables here. Let's actually put all these in the material category. And let's make a new variable, which is going to be our base width. That's going to be a float. Let's see if we compile it. It should be default like 0.8, and it's going to go from 0 to 1. And then we'll have our width offset. And we might have maybe a variable that's like centered. And that'll be a boolean. So if centered is false, then we can do that. So by default, it'll be centered. Otherwise, with offset, the width offset will be a default of 0.2, and we'll go from 0 to 1. I have 0 to 0.5. Ah, screw it, 0 to 1. Maybe the wind's blowing. Alright, so if we take all these, and they should be in the category, let's just say we'll just throw all this stuff into a category that you could actually edit. Just in case Sonocron did not hear me saying, go ahead and PM it to me. I'll just throw that in chat there. Alright. So base width, this is the width of the falls in percent at the bottom. And width offset is the offset from the left at this waterfall. Waterfall's base is positioned. And this would be if the waterfall is centered or not. If the base of the fall is centered. Okay, let's set our parameters here. And we're going to have a branch, so like if centered, then we are going to want to compute our own width offset. So if centered, then we are going to say that our offset is basically going to be what? 0.5 minus it's going to be 0.5 minus this value, and we're going to multiply base width by half. And then we'll set our width offset to that. So if true, then we set it right there. Otherwise, if it's false, we just use, width offset as it has been set. So we'll get the waterfall material instance, and we'll set scalar. Set scalar value. See, context sensitive doesn't even frickin' work here. Set scalar parameter value, and this is on a collection. And what is this value? This is the base width offset. Yeah, exactly, Calvin. It's frustrating. So we have the width offset, we'll set that, and we also need to set the width. So that would be the waterfall base width. Alright, let's compile that and save it. And what is this looking like here? We've got our base width is 8 versus that. So if we do this, it looks like that. So we can kind of squish it together or not squish it together based on values. So we can kind of just do it like that. That's pretty cool. So we've got our subtle little sorts of things there. So we could, we could have this big long waterfall which pours out. And while it is a subtle thing there, you know, your brain might actually register it. Maybe. Who are we kidding? Probably not. Probably nobody will give a shit about the work we just did. Alright, so we got that in there. We'll probably use it at some point for maybe a big, long waterfall in the background or something, right? So what's the next effect of the waterfall we need? Well, we need the panning. So let's get that panning in there. So for our panning, we need to literally just pan the V coordinate, right? Did we get rid of the panner? Yeah, we did. Alright, so the speed in the Y is going to be like this. So we'll just throw this coordinate in here. The speed is 1. Alright. Let's see if it does anything. It's not doing anything in the preview. It's got to compile all those shaders. Alright, so it is... This real-time preview is not actually doing what it should. Alright, so let's make sure that everything's actually working here. So if we change the base width, looks like that. Alright, so the panner is going to be like -1. And the thing is, the interesting part here... So, I don't know, I'm trying to think, like, so water speeds up as it falls, right? Like, you know, gravity and all that sort of bullshit. That's a thing, like, you know, as an object falls, it accelerates. So having a constant speed for the pan isn't really realistic, right? So would we want the panning speed to be multiplied by the height by some effect, right? Like, we'd basically take a, like, delta t, and then we would add to delta t a certain constant, multiplied by the height. A certain constant multiplied by t squared plus the height, and that would, what would the hell even that look like? Like, parts of this texture would pan faster than other parts, so the texture over time would get stretched and stuff wouldn't actually look proper? Is that? We could try it. This is gonna be weird. Well, is there another effect that we could have that wouldn't actually do that? Like, we want it to pan, but I guess if we stretched it, if we stretched the texture, I mean, we're already squishing the texture a little bit, but if we stretch the texture, it would, based on the height, that would give the same effect of the thing, the particles accelerating as they fall. So it wouldn't be a pan, it would be basically we would stretch based on the V would stretch itself as it went down. So we would multiply the V by itself and then add it back to itself. And we'd have a so we take the V, multiply it by itself, and we then multiply it by this value here and add it back to itself. So let's see if it can actually do this. There goes that texture stretching that I thought I had gotten rid of with the opacity channel. That looks ridiculous. But yeah, it's something like that. We've got this sort of stuff going on. And the reason that's not correct is because we're stretching it on both axes. So we need to break out the float 2, we need to add to Z, and then we need to create float, make float 2 again out of this thing. like so. Let's see what that looks like. Yeah, that would be another way to actually model the water, would be, right, instead of having textures and materials and crap like that, you do some sort of metaball effect with actual, you know, objects in the world that come together to create a texture itself. I'm just not going to do that. Too damned expensive. So yeah, as you can see, we've got the actual opposite of what the effect that we would expect. The water is slowing as it falls, but you can kind of see that is kind of what we want to do. You know, like it is. That's looking more like what we want. So we're on the right track. So we're multiplying it by itself, which should make it smaller as it goes up. And that's not the actual thing, so we just need to do 1 minus. Let's see how that looks. And the other thing then is we want to make this in world space for the multiply for the speed. That's kind of how we work on these visuals, is it just slowly gets better. We just, hopefully, right? Ooh, that's not good. It didn't work at all. And that's because we did 1 minus, and all that stuff. We need to multiply these together and then do 1 minus itself again. Gotta get that sweet water. Gotta compile all those shaders. It's just gotta happen. Gotta do it. Alright, so that's the effect that we want, except it looks wrong. And the reason it looks wrong is because we need to do stuff about this. We need to it's our V. Our V should be at, we preview this, it goes from 0 to what? Alright. Alright, it goes from 0 to 1, yes. But what we really want is we want our fall distance, right? Like we want our world position, our top position minus our world position. So it's more like our fall distance is going to be if we subtract our yeah, this is our fall distance goes from like 0 to blah. And so it's going to be our fall distance multiplied by this. So we're going to be using that value instead of that V. It's going to be our fall distance multiplied by itself. Well, let's see what it looks like then. So if we do it in a world space transformation, maybe we'll get a little bit more accurate results. Maybe we can tune it with this like fall speed parameter thing. See what it looks like here. Turned it into nothing. Let's try multiplying it by a very small number. And it sucks that our live preview doesn't take time into account here nicely. I mean, it kind of does, like if we rotate the cube. And again, it's not doing what we would expect. like this is the distance here, as we're subtracting these two values, and that's going to get higher. And if we multiply it by itself, well, let's not multiply it by itself here. Well, we're just waiting around for shaders to compile. That's pretty much this whole stream. Welcome to the world of working on shaders. Alright, well, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to change this to a parameter, a scalar parameter. We're going to call it fall speed. Come on. And then we can at least screw around with it inside of here. And that'll at least update it in real time instead of having to recompile the whole damn thing. Alright, so we'll compile that out, we'll apply this material, compile everything again, and after this finishes, then we should at least be able to mess around with this kind of at runtime as opposed to screw around with stuff and having to recompile shaders every time. You'd think that they would kind of already do that with some of this. So, okay, let's set our, let's grab this guy and let's say the gravity effect is 1 or 0. Gravity effect is 100 or 200 or humongous. Doesn't appear to do a goddamn thing. That's because I never actually hooked it up. Well, that's one way to have things not work. You can just not call your code. Alright, so gravity effect. I think I'm thinking about this wrong. So we're adding something to our v coordinate. If we add something to our v coordinate, that's completely wrong, right? Because if we add to our v coordinate, we actually shrink the object down. What we want to do is we don't want to subtract or do anything else. We actually want to multiply our v coordinate by this value, because what that'll do is it'll make it smaller. And if it's smaller, it stretches. So what's wrong here is our mathematical operation for how we apply this. This should be a multiply. And it should be, this value should, when it gets greater, this value should get smaller based on the fall speed. So it's basically the fall distance we do like 1.0 f. Yeah, we subtract it from 1 or something like that. So it's going to be the fall distance. All right, let's think about this. The fall distance should make this value go farther. So as the fall distance grows, this value needs to go from 1 to 0. So we need to take the fall distance, and it needs to be less than whatever computation we have needs to be very small, and we just subtract 1 from it. So this should allow us to play with the fall speed, and it should work now, supposedly. And that's why we had that weird thing earlier where I was like, why is it speeding up at the top of the falls and all that? Yeah, it can't be smaller than a certain number. Alright, well, let's look. So basically we need to multiply it by itself to have this thing work properly. We then need to divide by a large number and then multiply it by this fall speed. Divide by a very large number. And let's call this one fall speed damp, and let's just throw it in here so I can play with it. It's kind of funny that I'm working around the entire material editor compiling crap with constants by using dynamic stuff. It's just kind of, you would not expect to have to do this sort of bullshit in order to live preview your material. That's the whole point of a material editor, is that you can live preview it fast inside of it, and I can do it faster inside of the damned engine. So it's not gravity effect, it's going to be duplicate this. So let's snag this, fall speed divider. So let's apply that. Alright, so gravity effect we're going to have it like 1, and let's see with this fall speed divider. And we're in precision hell right now. It's getting optimized out. Alright, so we need actual like fall height, like the world distance for the pixel here. This value is just, it's just too damn high. So we should just use this we should just use this coordinate by itself here, as opposed to this. So let's just use it. So multiply it by itself, and then we'll divide it by the fall speed damping. And then we have the fall speed and the subtract and all that, and we should be okay to go. Yeah, basically the map stuff is breaking down with numbers that are too big or too small for a shader to accurately compute. Because it's like multiplying the distance by itself is just making the number go too big, and then we can't get it small enough back down. So yeah, fun times. Alright, 1.0f minus this thing. Yeah, we need to go back to what we were doing like a while ago. So subtract it from 1, multiply it by itself. Alright, let's see what we can do with this then. Take out some of this garbage. Well, we don't want the gravity effect to slow this thing down too much. I mean, that's what it's doing, is we're slowing down this thing by multiplying it by a number less than 0. But even at this speed, what this effect should not be so pronounced at the bottom. I mean, we could do a linear, like not multiply by itself. Let's see how that looks. And we're just tweaking values and messing with stuff until we get what we want. It's not a process where I know how long it'll take, or even if we're on the right track while we're doing it. We're just kind of figuring stuff out and thinking about it. So. Just gotta relax. Now we've made the water flow up. What have we done?